Welcome to the Meltzone podcast. This is episode 63. I'm Tom.
And I'm Stefan. And on today's episode, we chat about chickens, studio move, and the East Coast Rap Festival that Tom's gonna attend. Unfortunately, I won't be there this year. On the talk of Tom's studio move and his projects that he planned in the past. Also, just a bit of talk about another 3D printed robot arm that can hold cameras. Then, in the news, Fusion 360 implemented a lattice tool, which allows you to add lattice to your geometry and not only in the slicer. Then a bit of talk about a DIY high temperature resin printer and a bit of discussion on the topic, if you need one and if it's the basically enabler for the technology and those materials themselves. And then also Tom's gonna share his bread recipe.
It looks like we have a very food-heavy episode today. So Stefan's talking about the lettuce on 3D prints, but that is lattice, the infill structures, not the leafy greens. But like I said, we have a food-heavy topic topic lineup today. Pathogens on 3D prints. Can you make them food safe? Can you clean them? There's been some research into that. And then we're just covering questions and news from you guys. So Ultimaker Makerbot has a new name combined with Ultimaker. We talk about Tom's question about cherry-picked machines we might be getting from manufacturers. About whether the Formbot kit is now different than what I got with my original Voron, or what I bought with my Voron, and why we didn't include the Ratrig in the original comparison we did last time. Quick chat about long hot ends, high flow hot ends, why they droop and ooze more, or why they seem to droop and ooze more than you might think, or than the regular counterparts. And to finish everything out, a discussion about part cooling, whether the concentrated bird air pumps are a better solution than what we have today, and whether bed cooling fans could be an option. Okay, take two. Let's try this.
Take two. We screwed up the first one.
Yeah, we can now hear Stefan. Right.
Well, we didn't record the whole podcast before we found that out. Fortunately, we're just checking on your loaf of bread and...
Yeah. Things were going so good. Like in the new studio here, I just grabbed my computer, I plugged it in, and I was like, everything's here. Like network drives are here. The screen kind of works. I had to run a long Ethernet cord out to the switch in the hallway, but hey, camera plugged in. It's not even the right camera. This is the one that's typically mounted overhead, but it's good enough. The microphone works.
It's good enough. Yeah.
Currently
sad, but also happy to see that you are back in the new old studio.
I'm back in a stable situation that nobody can take from me. And I am is there an English version of this? Der Schmied seines eigenen Glücks. I'm the master of my own fortune.
Yeah, I think that's the right term.
There's nobody who can interfere with me getting comfortable, getting set up, and living my best YouTuber life.
Yeah,
in the basement studio.
So for now, this is your, permanent solution.
Yes.
Medium term solution.
Here's the thing. I hope I'm a good actor here. I'm pretending to bring this up the first time, but here's the thing. After this entire studio move, after having it done twice in 2 years, I am not sure what the right path forward is from here. Do I keep pursuing that hey, you gotta scale up, you gotta be the Linus Media Group of 3D printing, have employees, have a big warehouse full of people and of stuff, and just bustling with having a what's the term, a bustling enterprise? I don't know if I want to get to that point anymore, or if I just want to say, hey, screw it, kick back, make a video every 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever. That's enough for me to get by and just chill. Because so far, every time I've tried scaling up, it's just been a huge headache. It's cost me shit tons of money, shit tons of my time. And I feel like I could have made better content and more content in the end if I just had stayed put where I am. I don't know. I'm lacking the energy to like say, hey, I want to get a plot of land and build a new workshop there, warehouse, whatever it is, and scale up. Right now, I really don't want to do that. So for the time being, this is going to be... Voron's here. Hi, Voron. This is going to be my permanent-ish studio again. It's worked for the longest time. It's fine. It's not fantastic because it's relatively small. It's 20 square meters plus a bit of workshop space that was like the first ever studio. And it's basement, like it's a basement, right? It's all concrete, mostly concrete walls. Acoustics aren't great. Like it's not super warm in the winter here. Like whatever, it's fine. I can arrange with that better because those are things that are under my control. Same thing I said last time. Those are things that I can influence versus the situation at the big studio. So yeah,
I guess for the things that you're currently doing, it's a bit less convenient in there, but
for sure. I mean, more space is always more convenient.
Yeah, it is, but it's still happy to see that you're not burned out, broken, and just say, okay, screw this. I gonna go back to my old job in industry, and
that's just not an option for me. It's just I don't want to do that. I could. I mean, I still have a bachelor's degree and like experience under my belt, but I just don't want to do that. That was never fulfilling for me. Either I was in the wrong companies or it's just not who I am, but it's just not an option. So what choice do I have but to look forward and make this what I have now the best possible version of itself and the best chance of me doing what I want to do. So it is what I have. I got to work with what I have. In German, I guess we say "Steh auf, Männchen." It's what choice do I have, really? It's So there's I just don't see a point of like moaning or worrying about things you can change. So as you turning the wrong way, as you can probably see, I put in a kitchen in the studio.
Just as I did.
But mine's better. Mine's bigger.
More expensive.
Yeah, nicer. Look, I was like, hey, if I'm going to put in this, if I'm going to like renovate the studio and make it my, I don't know how long I'm going to be in here studio, I'm just going to make it the best possible version. I'm going to put in a nice kitchen. IKEA, full extension slides. I looked up how much I paid for drawers, and I think it was like more than half of the kitchen's price was just drawers.
Yeah.
So yeah, plenty of space for like small stuff. I'm gonna have to see how I arrange with this. I think gear, production equipment is gonna go all in drawers because that has no point living in IKEA Sammler boxes.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna have to see like 3D printer parts. Where do those go? We'll see. I'm gonna have to find ways of using this newfound.
So I've been asking myself the same question: where do I put all of my stuff now in the new studio? And of course, I also have the kitchen, but just with doors because I cheaped out because I didn't want to spend like $2,000 or $2,500. And I think I just spent $800 or something for basically the same size that you have, but I was asking myself, do I now put stickers on all of the doors that I know where I put everything? Will you try to remember where you're going to put all of the stuff?
Now, here's the thing with organization. So the stickers aren't just to help you remember where stuff is. The stickers are actually there to help you put the stuff in the right spot. So if you have, I don't know, let's say pliers. and you're like, these are like crimping pliers, whatever. Where do I put these? You have a drawer for pliers. They go there. You know to remember. They go there. It's the other way around. My plan. I keep rotating the wrong way. So I've got these, which I can't really point to. Where's my hand? There. I've got these stainless steel, 30 centimeter wide handles. I think I'm gonna put like a transparent you can get for other label makers. You can get the transparent strips. I think I'm gonna label them on the handles.
Okay.
I gotta see what looks best. But yeah, there are gonna be labels for these, just to keep organized. And I think as the background of a 3D printing studio setup, labels are totally fine. I don't need to be like, again, LTT clean with like they've got very nice kitchens. I gotta say they look very aesthetically pleasing on set.
Well, and if you're having a good lens and can use all of the bokeh, you won't be able to see your stickers anymore in the background. Right. So if the shots look nice, you won't be able to see the stuff in the background anyways.
Yeah. So interestingly, I've always had people complain ever since I went full frame with the Sony. I've had people complain like, hey, turn down your aperture. I can't see crap in this shot. It's way too blurry. Yeah. And I see the point. Yes, it's just way easier for me to stay at f2.8 because then all my exposure settings are just there and they're on point and I don't have to fix anything in post. But in the last video that I put up, I intentionally stopped down to like f8 at points. And of course, the close-up shots were crisper and a bit noisier because you have to crank up the ISO, but it's an A7S III. It doesn't matter really. And interestingly, the comments about blurry, out of detail shots went back. So full frame might not be the best choice in the end. Full frame and big aperture lenses. Just stick with your smartphone. But those have pretty impressive bokeh too now.
Yeah, but just like the computational bokehs.
So man, look at like the current iPhones. They have pretty big sensors. And all
right.
all the 48 megapixel sensors, they're pretty big, and they're usually paired with like an f1.7 lens. Yeah. They have some nice bokeh. Yeah. Even without the what's it called? Cinematic mode on iPhone, just it does not look good. But yeah.
So. Well, I also bought a full frame camera at the beginning of this year, but I've never been using it for really filming stuff for videos. I'm just using it for my macro photography. So I'm still on my micro 4/3 where, like depth of field is usually also not a big problem.
Yeah. Yeah, well, too little depth of field usually.
Too little depth of field.
But wouldn't it be? I mean, if you put the same macro lens on your micro four thirds, wouldn't that's going to give you a 2x magnification into that? Yeah. But you're using the microscope lens on your full frame.
I do.
Or do you use an explicit macro lens?
No, I do have the 30 millimeter macro lens for my micro four thirds, and for the full frame, I just have like the real microscope objective put on one of these extension tubes. So nothing special there. The camera is really underused. It's kind of sad, but it's the other two cameras. They still do a good job, and they are good enough for the for my normal filming stuff. I did use the new full frame camera for the podcast before I moved, but
that's good use for that. They were sending through Skype or through what we were using before, whatever.
Zoom.
Zoom. That gets compressed to absolute garbage. Good use there.
That's how it is. One thing we already talked about when we messed up the first recording was having a big space, of course, enables you to do a couple of projects that are just not possible in a small space. And as I said before, things that I had in my mind was that you, of course, got the new machining shop, you got a lathe and your mill, but you also thought about the 6-axis robot. And but you just said that this is not something where the small space that you're having now really hinders you.
Well, it's gonna be different setup. So the original idea for that 6-axis camera robot thingamajig, probably 5-axis would have. Yeah, 5-axis would have been sufficient. The idea before that was to have in front of my studio desk here, I was going to have a gantry that ran across the ceiling and across the floor and just have an upright that moves left, right, and then just stack linear axes on that.
Yeah.
That was before I even knew I was going to move to the big studio. So when I moved there, that idea got scrapped because it didn't have a point to anchor it to the ceiling. I didn't have it was 5 meter tall ceilings. I couldn't put anything there. So I looked into building my own robot arm, which would have been a really cool project. Bit over my head though. So that was a project I was afraid of because there's so many things that have to be perfect for it to work. Backlash in your drive units. If you have backlash, you can toss your 6-axis. It's not going to look good on camera at all. If you the idea was to mount a camera on that robot effector and use that to get the MKBHD style cool shots. So yeah, that was the idea for the big studio. Now here, I can move back to the gantry idea. I can have a rail top bottom open builds were in touch with us, and they were like, hey, yeah, we want to sponsor something. That's going to be a lot of open builds profiles though, but I think that's the only way to go with this. You can't get an MGN 15 or whatever in 3 meters length. You could, but it's going to be $1,000. So yeah, I'm going to have to see what I do here, but that of course is a possibility that I have now in this space to just build a robot like that. And it's going to be much simpler. It's just going to be XYZ and then an A and a B axis and that's it.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are some doors that have closed with getting out of the big studio, but there are other doors that have opened. So yeah.
Well, at least you're saving a ton of money every month that you can invest in things.
yeah. So that, of course, that's one of the calculations that you can do now. Where it's hey, I'm saving about $1,000 a month with rent and stuff. You know what? Let's just get a new laptop. Let's invest in gear and. Have some nice things that make work in this space easier. Of course, it's not going to be the same. Where's the power plug in this thing? There it is. It's not going to be the same as if you had space, but you can maybe compensate for that in other ways. I don't know.
Yeah. Talking about your new laptop, I also purchased a new one and just arrived 5 minutes before we started the recording. So you bought yourself a gaming laptop.
No, it's a creator's laptop.
It's a gaming laptop.
Oh yeah, it is. You can game on it's an Asus ROG, which stands for Republic of Creators.
A ROG creator.
Just a regular G14.
RGB keyboard.
Yeah, of course. And it has the Animatrix LED, which is complete bullshit. I mean, with the entire back can light up.
Yeah.
But I bought it specifically for a purpose, and I think gear should always have a purpose that you get it for. This is to edit the videos at ERRF that need to go up before the show starts. So I'm going to be at ERRF. Of course, you won't. That sucks, but I've got 2 videos that need to go up before the show even starts. I'm going to record those on Friday evening. I'm going to edit those on this guy, upload them, and then I'm just going to pass out and probably sleep until Sunday until the show's over.
Yeah, for that purpose, it's the right machine. And the old Huawei that you had was already MateBook 4 years,
4 years. Yeah, it's a 2018 model. And it didn't have it had an MX150 GPU. So, it could render videos, but slowly.
Yeah. And well, since you're doing 4K and usually even 60 frames per second, you need a bit of you need kind of a beefy machine to do that.
Well,
like when you're on the road.
The Huawei kind of was able to edit videos,
Yeah.
but then exporting was just a pain. I
Yeah.
am going to step down gear for ERRF though. So typically I was traveling with like the full big camera, multiple lenses. I'm just going to bring the small Sony ZV-1 that he's seeing me on right now, and that is fine. That is totally adequate for the show. And it makes, like, you need a camera that's 200 grams instead of a body, a lens, a bigger tripod, a bigger laptop, more storage. Like, it adds so much overhead if you're traveling. I'm just going to put this thing in my pocket and be like, here. Yeah. And good image stabilization. So I shall travel light.
2 weeks ago, I was in Switzerland in Winterthur, taking a look at the 4-axis Prusa printer that does conical slicing and printing.
Right, that converted one.
Yeah, the converted one. And fortunately, since I lacked one at Murph, I bought myself one of these small video lights, and this was the best. Sorry?
You didn't have one of those before?
I didn't have a video light before.
Useful.
And this thing was worth every penny. The shots that I made using this light in really bad lighting situations were great. And my shots from the Midwest Rep Festival this year, they were so horrible because lighting was awful.
It always is. It shows.
Yeah. If you bring also one of these along, I think it's going to be a totally sufficient setup.
Yeah, I keep. So I have two. I have the Falcon 77 that is like giving me a bit of a boost, bit of a front light here. Just bouncing that against the wall. That's a bigger one. But I keep like one of those €50 smaller ones permanently mounted to my full frame camera. I just leave it on there. I can flick the switch on and just get a bit of fill light. I can't believe you didn't have one of those before.
No, and in the past I always bought not the most expensive ones. Of course, this one was also now only I think $90 or something like that. But especially with there's a silicone diffuser on the front, it gives such good, nice lighting.
Yeah. All right, should we move on to some actual 3D printing topics since we are? Well, here's the thing. What is this podcast even? What are we? Are we a rambling, chatty, behind the scenes podcast, or are we like a on topic 3D printing podcast? I keep asking this question every time, but I'm so not
I
sure.
guess a bit of both. Of course, we could be a 3D printing news podcast, but I don't know. I have the feeling that to have a unique selling point, because that's easy for anyone to do. We talk a bit about the behind the scenes of being a YouTube star.
Sure. Yeah. Sometimes we're just people. You know. Sometimes people are just people, man.
Yeah.
Did we already talk about your cock?
We didn't talk about my cock yet.
Okay,
so my cock is my rooster, and my rooster is the only one surviving an event that unfortunately happened tonight, where our chicken coop was raided by a marten.
I'm trying not to laugh. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah, it was. So I'm still a bit sleepy because, well, I woke up around 1 o'clock tonight and we heard weird noises outside. And once we got outside, the rooster was still running around and totally fine. But the two chicken that we had, they were unfortunately already dead. And somehow a fox or a marten got into our chicken coop and unfortunately killed our two beloved chicken. So it's kind of a sad story. I had to bury them this morning in pouring down rain.
That's the roughest part.
It was, especially since like 4 weeks ago we already buried our 7-year-old really big rabbit. And also for our daughter, it's kind of hard. And she basically, she kind of understands it, not totally understands it, but I wanted her to be also at like the grave this morning and just, I don't know, kind of see the dead chicken, that she knows what happened to them, and that they're now getting buried, and it's the circle of life, basically. It was a bit earlier than usually, but if that she kind of understands what happened to the chicks.
Yeah,
so,
you were keeping them as pets for the most part, right? They were part of the family. They weren't just animals out in the coop that you would use for eggs, and eventually for chicken stew. They were, like I said, part of the family. They were pets for the most part. So
kind of unfortunate, but
sorry for you, man. Especially
thanks.
Two in a row. First the rabbit or the bunny, and then the chickens. So you basically,
they were already 3 years old, but
I don't know if it's all for chickens.
It depends. So normal chicken that lay egg and that they're and they which are bred to lay eggs, they don't really get that old because they just burn out themselves. But also like the ones that we had, 3, 4, 5 years is usually their usual lifespan.
They had a good life, I'm sure.
I hope they had. So, yeah.
With you, definitely. There is the music from the next topic, 3D printing a robot. No, we already talked about that.
3D printed robot. Yeah, maybe let's get back to 3D printing stuff, or let's start with 3D printing stuff. Maybe just on a mark on robot arms and DIY robots. A video, I think that was also released yesterday, got flooded into my timeline or in my YouTube start page by 3D printed live, 3D printing a robot to hold my camera. So this guy built I think a 5-axis robot.
With 5-axis is more than enough for a camera. Yeah,
with the goal of putting a camera at the effector. It wasn't able to hold the full 1 kilograms of load, so in the end he just put a smartphone in the front. Really nice channel. Would really highly recommend to check the video out and the channel itself. He did a lot of work on harmonic drives for that robot arm, and we put a link to his channel down in the description.
Yeah, so fully DIY project. Kind of was what I was trying to do, or eventually trying to do with mine, but he got there first.
So next one.
That's an involved project.
It is, and he even built his own control board. He said that it was totally unnecessary, but it was just.
Here's the thing: these robot control boards, if you buy them, they're like $1,000 essentially for nothing.
Yeah,
I mean, they're not too complex.
But the thing is, and we talked about that already. If you just want to control a couple of stepper motors, you can use any 3D printer board that has enough stepper drivers.
Hey, do it.
You talk to the Do It guys. So the thing that you need to figure out is the reverse kinematics, and I think Marlin doesn't have an implementation for robot.
Well, for deltas, yeah, but not for robot geometries.
Yeah.
So
I can't remember exactly. Does Do It, or is there an implementation in Do It already, or is this something they might be looking into?
It's in beta, so it is getting implemented currently. Last time I checked, it was in beta. It's coming for sure.
Okay.
I think you can definitely flash the beta firmware currently right now and use it, but it might be unstable as with any beta tools. But yeah, that's inverse kinematics for those of you who don't know, is basically if you have a robot arm, what the motors at each, or what each joint wants to know is which rotational position do I have to move to. But that is not what your G code or your input looks like. You don't want to have to control every joint individually. You want to tell the effector, hey, go to this position with these rotational angles, and then have the robot figure out how to get there and how it needs to position its joints. to do that. And that is one of the... You don't necessarily need it. You can control a robot arm by controlling the joints directly, but it's not very smooth to do it that way.
Yeah. So let's continue.
Exactly. Okay. Fusion 360 had a tweet that we're referencing here, which is a new feature. They have latticing that you can now do in your CAD program. So latticing, essentially it's infill. It is an infill pattern that you can generate directly in CAD, and it is probably not a feature that is going to be included with the free versions. But if you have the bigger versions of Fusion, just something to look into.
Yet many of the beta features are often still available in free versions, just to have more beta testers.
Yeah,
until it's working, and then it's getting into the paid subscription.
Exactly.
I unfortunately have a paid subscription or an Autodesk influencer, I don't know, subscription type thing. So I can tell if it's the free version, but we link the tweet down below. Creating this lattices in Fusion. I think it's not really that important for FDM additive manufacturing, but if you're doing SLS 3D printing, if you're doing SLA, mask SLA 3D printing, where you usually don't use infill patterns, this can be an option to add, to hollow out your part, but still have internal structure that adds additional rigidity.
Well, MSLA parts do have, or MSLA slicers do have an infill option right now, but it's not very... you don't get the level of control over infill as you do in an FDM slicer. What is cool though in the having infill or the lattice structure in your CAD is you can also chuck that into simulation tools right in Fusion. I would assume, because it's actual geometry that you're getting. So you can run your simulations, so that they are going to be pretty expensive because you have tons of detail. Expensive as in computationally expensive. Yeah. You can run those now on actual real geometry. So that, and do you want to say something about that?
Yeah. Please continue. Okay. I'll add a comment in the end.
Yeah, and what they're also showing is you can add modifiers with the solidity to have a path and have basically solidity, how thick the lattice structure is versus how much air is being kept in there along a path. So you can have segments of your part that have a strong infill, the segments that have less infill, and it gradually transitions between those different densities. So that's something that I don't think slicers can do right now. You can do like the modifier.
Well, you have the lightning infill, but yeah,
true. But you have no control over that, really.
No, not in such a gradual amount, and this can help with the strength of the part, and also what especially if you're having more solid parts. What's also very, very nice if you're having the lattice in CAD directly, you can, for example, put lattices between like where the part starts and where the lattice ends, because usually you have really sharp corners there, which might be a potential point of failure. And I just know that from like my professional experience. So it's nice to have the possibility to smooth out the transitions between an infrastructure and a solid part structure.
Yeah. Yeah, so these lattices are not optimized for FDM. They're probably more suitable for SLS or SLA. But still, cool feature.
I just checked; it's not included in the free subscription. But if you're having a paid subscription, it could be available for you. Just my thoughts on that, on lattices in general. They're overhyped, in my opinion. They look very nice on promotional pictures, and if you want to sell something, use lattices and say how good your printer or your process or your part is because you're using lattices. But there are not a ton of applications where lattices are really beneficial. This is maybe a bit pessimistically said. There are things like structures under pressure or heat exchangers and things like that, where you want to increase the surface area, where lattices can help a ton. But if you're just having a structural part that you want to optimize, lattices are rarely giving you any benefit.
So
if you're not using them for as support structure that remains on your part in the end,
right?
Which FDM 3D printing does.
But so you're essentially saying, hey, optimize your part geometry and use, I don't know, topology optimization or generative modeling or something like that, instead of just using a lattice.
Yeah. There are even topology optimization solutions. I think Fusion even supports that now, where you don't have the transition between no material and full material, but you can also tell it, in the regions where the topology optimizer would say have, I don't know, between 20 and 80% material, you can use lattice structure in this area, in these regions, which gives you a part that where you have really solid sections, but then also these gradient areas where lattice structure is used. As I said, it looks nice. And topology is also a really nice program to do lattice optimization. But from all my experience, there are little use cases where it's really worth using. But it looks nice. It looks really nice.
Oh yeah, that can be its own feature. Something that looks nice.
Definitely. You want to sell your parts, you want to sell your software, you want to sell your printer, I don't know, it can help. And there are the applications, those unicorn applications, but
sure.
Yeah. So, cool.
Then next up, we have the open source high temp printer, the project Valkyrie? Yeah. Which you seem to be skeptical about.
Well, not really skeptical about.
Whether it's practical and needed, not about whether the design works.
Also not this. I'm quite sure that the design works.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But the question is, who needs a high temperature FDM 3D printer? So with nozzle temperatures up to 450 degrees Celsius and things like that. So there are rarely any materials that you print above 300 degrees Celsius. I don't know, I have some Fadus high temp nylon right here that I think prints between 320 to 340 degrees Celsius, which I currently can't print on my machines.
There you go.
There are the PEIs, the peaks, the packs, but these are, on the one hand, expensive materials. So for a kilo of peak, you're paying $500 or $1,000. And those materials are also really hard to print. Of course, the heated chambers, they help a ton. But for example, for printing peak material, even an 80 degrees heated chamber won't help you a ton. You need to get above 100 degrees Celsius and things like that. So the question that I was asking myself, who has the application for a high temp 3D printer which can't be satisfied by current like enclosed 3D printers? I don't know, the Bamboo Lab gets up to 50, 60 degrees Celsius. Also the Voron with a big heated bed and the chamber gets up to 50, 60 degrees Celsius. What are the real applications for these machines, and who would be using a DIY high temp 3D printer instead of a commercial machine if you are already spending a ton of money on the material itself?
Look, I'm going to argue against you a bit here. My take is it's the same as when 3D printing originally came up, the low-cost rep movement. Like, people are asking, like, what are you actually going to do with those, like, low-temperature plastic parts that melt when you look at them? They're like, it's plastic. What's the use case for those?
Yeah.
And people still bring that up, of course. It's just plastic. Like, I want parts out of metal. Like, I can't do that. And this kind of feels like the same situation where it's a tech that is there, but it's still looking for an application. It is still looking for this one area that, either not a lot of people are into or not a lot of people are using, because there's no way to get into it. It's just not practical to, I don't know, 3D print plastic parts that, well, combustion engines are on their way out too, so I don't know. I'm sure there are applications that this is great for if you go for like the super high-end plastics, the peaks, the packs, the whatevers. What I think this is really great at with 80 degrees heated chamber is printing ABS and polycarbonate. Polycarbonate is such a great material that almost nobody can print. You can get the PC blend from Prusa, and that's like bearable. You can kind of make that work, but it's never great. But like, polycarbonates is a materials group that is, I think, severely underused. Because there's so many applications where that would be absolutely fantastic for temperature stability in the end.
Temperature stability, and I printed a bit with, I think, Hobby King's premium polycarbonate. It's not the easiest to use, but the part strength and also the layer adhesion was better than almost anything I found with other materials. So it's kind of unfortunate that there aren't that many machines that can use just plain old simple polycarbonate.
Yeah.
So,
and the cool thing about polycarbonate is once you get it tuned in, it actually prints great. The print results are fantastic.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that I don't like the project. I find it really nice, and I always appreciate if people are using their time and dedicate their talent into creating something new, because they could have, I don't know, made the 10,000th Ender 3 mod, but they tried to engineer this machine to be used for these materials, and also they integrated a filament dry box in there as well, which is basically essential if you're working with these materials, because they're usually so hygroscopic, or you need to print them that dry to get it even working. So it looks like a real nice machine. I just wanted to discuss who has applications for that. And if you are, I don't know, into space applications or microsatellites where peak packs PI might be interesting as well. For these, the question is, do I want to work with a DIY machine, or do I buy an off-the-shelf machine that is maybe already tuned for these materials?
Yeah, same thing again. It's not. Sure, you would consider this a professional application because, my bread's ready. You would consider that a professional application because it's just not been accessible at the DIY level so far. Okay, I gotta check on my bread. So this is the walnut buttermilk bread based on Gino Heuska's recipe. And next up is the plain buttermilk bread that goes into the oven. Be right back.
Okay. Do you link the recipe below?
Yeah, you can. Foodsel.net.
Foodsel.net.
Baked with 100% renewable energy. Actually, solar power from the roof. Still surprisingly sunny these days.
Yeah, it has been really horrible this morning, but now, the sun is also back out again, and I'm sitting here in the office with my shades closed. I didn't find the recipe.
Foodsell.net. You had the wrong...
Foodsell.net? So it's not on Gina's normal blog?
It might be linked somewhere. Or food.foodsell.net.
Foodsell. There we go. Yeah, you should write Foodsell with a D and not a T.
Yeah, it's about eating, not about feet. Yeah, it's a buttermilk bread. I've been making that thing for a year now, and it's just, so simple. You just chuck everything together, wait for a day, and then chuck it in the oven, and it comes out so good. Put some hazelnut spread on there, and you're gonna have a really good time.
I should try that out. Perfect. Talking about food and 3D printing and stuff like that. That's a perfect That's a perfect segue to, well, yeah, it's a perfect segue to the next topic.
Okay.
Pathogens on 3D prints, which is a bit the question, should you use or can you use 3D printed parts for, I don't know, masks, respirators, but also for food-related stuff?
Yeah.
So
it's so to give background, that's always been a contentious topic. Where there were concerns about the materials that are in your plastic, be it additives or even like lead contamination from the brass and the nozzles, which I think we talked about on the podcast at some point.
Yep.
And we got to the conclusion that like, yeah, the lead from the nozzle is like completely irrelevant because you're not like abrading the nozzle. But mostly about the pores on your 3D prints, because of an FDM 3D print and an SLS one as well. SLA, well, SLS even worse. An SLA one as well has not really pores, but just ridges and stuff where stuff can stick to and get stuck to.
Yeah. So we linked a Hackaday article down in the show notes, which links itself to I think that's from a personal blog, a blog post about a guy who did a bit of analysis. He seems to be into 3D printing like respirators and masks, and asked himself, are you able to disinfect and just clean those parts after you've been using them, so they're not just like one-use items? And there are some really nice SEM pictures in there, and also some pictures where he basically put like just swabs of his mask or just samples that he did on a growth media, and try to find out how many bacteria and things like that are growing in those petri dishes. And in the end, he basically showed that at least the parts that he tested, he was able to get them really clean with just washing them in dish soap or with dish soap. And then how did he actually formulate that? Basically just dumping them in diluted bleach for a couple of minutes in the end. And that seemed to work for him.
Yeah. So the 90% of pathogens, is that just the soap, or is that soap plus bleach? I would expect the chucking them in bleachy water that it would eliminate more than 90%, because 90% isn't particularly good. I mean that's probably dirtier than your toilet seat after you've cleaned it. I mean, those cleaners always say like 99.99%, right? That's so. And
I guess
toilet seats in general aren't that disgusting. Like phones are more disgusting, and keyboards than that. So like, yeah.
Maybe just a quick note on that. It still feels so wrong for me. And well, since most of the phones are now waterproof, to just take them and put them under the sink and wash them also with dish soap. But that's
I do that all the time.
What I'm regularly doing, but it still feels so wrong. Anyways, I guess you need the combination of like washing it with soapy water and then the additional dumping into bleach to, for once, I guess, remove bigger chunks of material. And maybe also to that the tensides are helping, that maybe the bleach later can get into all of these ridges and cracks and things like that.
So one of the key things that he's saying here is you shouldn't worry about the ridges, because wherever pathogens could get in the ridges, in the layer lines, your soap's going to go as well. So if you have a soap that can take care of whatever you're worried about, then it should be able to get to it.
Yeah. Of course, the parts that he has been using, they are very simple. They just look like simple walls where he did the tests. I know that there are other papers on that remark, and I think in the end you still have to pay a bit of attention, and he even mentions that down in his article. In the end, if you want to be totally safe, resin coat your parts after that, to just decrease the surface area in general, and also decrease like the number of ridges and cracks that are on your part. That's in the end always the safest option.
Coating with a resin or epoxy is also something that he's suggesting, but mostly for making it watertight.
Yeah, that's also a good point. The thing I also want to mention, so I read over the article before we started, and I found that this guy has stolen a picture from me.
Bastard. without
any quotation and things like that. Yeah.
You gonna take him to court?
Definitely will take him to court.
Okay. Justice will be served.
I don't know. I told you that before. The article looks really nice and well researched and things like that, but I don't know, when you're then using pictures from somebody else, why just put a footnote in there?
Yeah, at least give
a
credit.
Reference.
Yeah,
give credit. That would be totally fine for me. But
whenever someone asks me like, "Hey, can I use a screenshot or an excerpt of your videos in my paper or in school or whatever?" I'm usually like, "Hey, yeah, sure thing. That's not a problem at all." But like maybe at least if you don't ask, give the credit to where it's from. Okay. Yeah. Funny.
Maybe just a very short last remark. There are also materials that have silver ions in them that might also help to reduce the bacteria growth on these materials.
Do those actually work? I guess if it's in 3D printed materials, maybe better chance, but where you usually see those is like in underwear or socks or shirts, where it's like, hey, yeah, it's gonna reduce odors and stuff. And I don't quite remember, but there's some foggy place in my mind has stored that those actually don't work too well, because after once or twice washing them, it's basically useless.
Yeah. As far as I read, there are commercial plastics and additives available that do exactly that for also injection molded parts, to just reduce the amount of bacteria growth on them. Of course, it will not be as effective as really like having strands of silver in your underwear or things like that. I don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, silver is expensive, so it makes sense that they would use as little as possible. So I'd assume it's going to be the same thing, where it's like encapsulated in some polymer somehow. I don't know. Okay, next one. Ultimaker and Makerbot. So you guys have placed your bets on what they are going to be called after the merger, whether they are even going to like what's the word? Make their brands into one. Consolidate. Yeah, consolidate the brands into one. And of course, the cool name would have been Maker. I mean, the Maker from Makerbot and then the Maker from Ultimaker. Make it Maker. What was the other ones? Ultibot. Yeah,
the Ultibot and the Maker.
Unfortunately, they went for the absolutely lamest option possible. They're just now called Ultimaker, and
with a capital M in Ultimaker.
Yeah, okay. I miss the times when companies still had humor, but okay, it's Ultimaker.
It's Ultimaker. I'm still not sure if like the Makerbots will be called Ultimakers in the future, and the Ultimakers will be called capital M Maker, or if still the brands remain and just like the big parent company's Ultimaker that handles all the collaboration work.
And we have speculated about how they would fit in and how they would segment the markets between each other, because the last thing you want basically is, well, you might want to do to compete with yourself in the same market. That's what a lot of brands are doing. Is just, you have one parent company that has 5 brands that are all in the same market segment that push out everyone else. Because if you go on whatever comparison platforms, it's going to be 5 of you, and then 5 of the others. That gives you 50% visibility share. That could happen, but I mean, my speculation was that Ultimaker is going to be the high-end brand, and Makerbot's going to be the, I don't know if they're going to be low-end, but like education space products.
Yeah.
We shall see.
I'm just excited to see what and if there's going to be any changes to Thingiverse.
So I've seen someone from Ultimaker comment that Umagine is actually going to be, that they're going to start working on it again. Because Umagine has also been neglected at best.
But the thing is, Thingiverse, so my parents don't know a lot about 3D printing, but they know Thingiverse, or a place where you get STL files. Thingiverse has been becoming the name for a platform to download STLs, just like Hoover or Tempo for our paper tissues that we use here in Germany. So I guess the right move would be to try to revive Thingiverse and push that again, because it has the biggest market share of any platform. Yeah. I've never used Umagine. I don't know if...
I tried using Umagine, but it was not that popular and also not too well done in a couple spots. And then when Prusa was like, hey, we're actually going to build the real deal, I was like, yes, please. So yeah, I was on Prusa printers and now printables for the most part. I'm always looking for like the alternatives to going with the big name brand. That's why I've usually had AMD PCs instead of Intel. But yeah, it's going to be interesting what they do with Thingiverse, Umagine, whether they're going to consolidate those as well. I don't know. So what I read, I think it was from Date or from somebody else at Ultimaker, is that it sounded like Umagine is going to stick around.
Okay.
I don't know if it's going to be a different front end for Thingiverse. That would be stupid. Or if it's going to be its own platform dedicated or at a different audience. I don't know.
We'll see. We'll see what time brings. In the moment, it's just an opportunity for other platforms like Printables, like Thangs, like My Mini Factory, and all of the other ones to gain more and more market share.
Yeah.
All right. I guess that was already after maybe an hour, the news section. Let's get to also some very interesting questions, don't we?
Yes, and the first one is from Tom Yokom. I'm not going to read out the whole thing, but essentially he is asking us as 3D printing influencers and reviewers about manufacturers cherry picking the samples they send to us. So
cherry picking and even modifying those printers that they are performing better than the normal retail units. He, for example, said adding a better LCD into a resin printer. So the reviewer doesn't notice that's a better one, and that person might say it is performing way better, or it's performing very well, but the retail units are shipped with a different model. So
yeah, so with a filament printer, better built hot and different extruder gears, that sort of thing that is like very quick to switch out, but maybe isn't going to get noticed as like, hey, I got a different one. Let me start with two things here, maybe. The first one is, the first aspect is, do they really ship you a cherry-picked machine, or is it just that the machine you buy now isn't the same machine that you're going to be able to buy in 2, 3, 4, 6 months? Because they're going to run their cost down rounds and essentially replace parts with cheaper ones. And that is something that companies very definitely do over the lifetime of a product, not just the Chinese ones, but also big European brands in or outside the 3D printing space. Very common thing to do. Typically, when a reputable company does it, they have to make sure that it still performs the same within the requirements, within the specs. So as long as you use the product within specs, you shouldn't notice a difference. With 3D printers, I mean, yeah, sometimes stuff gets swapped out and it actually performs worse. It limits what it can do. Sometimes it performs for the better. So one thing that comes to mind is Creality and their boards. In the past, not having space for bootloaders or not coming with a bootloader, now coming with one. That makes it much easier to flash your firmware. So stuff gets swapped around all the time. And that's one of the things that makes reviewing a machine so difficult, especially when it's even Prusa does it. I was going to say, especially if it's a Chinese one, but no, even Prusa on what used to be called the Mark III, under the same name, they keep swapping out parts. Now you have the screwed down bearings, you have a different manufacturer of who knows what. They keep tweaking the machine here and there. So that might be confused to a reviewer getting an early cherry-picked and special machine that is different from what you're going to get in retail. That was
from my experience
too, but
review units that I have gotten in the past, often or regularly, I wouldn't say were broken, but I never had the impression that I got a cherry-picked unit. But of course, that can potentially happen. I would have never heard it happening within the at least 3D printing space.
Well, how can you tell?
That's the thing. If they're doing a good job, don't know.
The tricky thing is when you get products to review directly from the manufacturer. If they send it to you directly, then of course there is a chance that I wouldn't say that they're going to swap out parts. I don't think that any manufacturer is bold enough to do that. But what I can definitely imagine is that they give the machine just an extra thorough check. Just have someone look over it, make sure everything's working, and make sure you're not getting like a Montagsmorgens product. Not one that's been made Monday morning with all the flaws in it.
Yeah.
Often though, Tom mentions Anycubic especially. I've gotten review products from Anycubic, and it's been what's their big LCD printer. I don't know. He's bringing up like, hey, if you get a different one and you say it's awesome, you've made them quote $10 million. That is 10,000 units sold. I get review units from their warehouses, from Amazon, and at times that is just, if you're a manufacturer, if you're a seller on Amazon, you can put in an order for yourself and basically have Amazon ship out a machine out of their stock as everyone else would be getting it. And those are 100% exactly the same thing that everyone else gets. There's just no way that they could, they send Amazon their stock, and Amazon takes one from their stock and sends it to you. That is exactly the same machine everyone else gets.
Yeah.
So Anycubic in particular, I would say, yeah, they're totally cool in that.
Yeah. Why don't we buy our review units? Why don't we buy our review units?
I don't wanna. It's expensive.
It's expensive, and you don't need your 25th printer. Of course, you could sell it after that again, but it's so much hassle that it's not really worth it. And
oftentimes also the other thing is like, are you still relevant if you buy a machine when it comes out? Elegoo has done this in particular, where the machine's out, but you can really only buy it, there are only really 100 samples or something, or 100 machines in stock. And then when you can actually buy it, nobody cares about it anymore. When you can buy it, when it gets shipped. That is something that I have to point out Elegoo for, because they've definitely been guilty of that. So a lot of times there's just no other way of reviewing a machine than to rely on the manufacturer to get it in time. And ideally, in time means, a couple of weeks before it even gets announced or released.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, the question is always if that makes us biased, and we've talked about that several times.
Yeah.
And I guess we try to make a good as a job as possible to not be biased by getting that free product.
I always tell the manufacturers, hey, I would rather have you guys take it back because I don't need to deal with storage and with disposing of the machine. I don't care about having another printer in my arsenal. I have all the printers I need. I have all the printers I want. I can do anything I want, and if I need something else, I'm going to build one. I'm not going to pick one that's already out there and pre-made.
Yeah.
Which brings us perfectly to the next question from Total Noob about the Ratrig V-Core. Basically as a follow-up to the Bamboo versus Prusa XL versus Voron discussion. Yeah. So what about that, Stefan? Why didn't we include that?
What? Because I see, and this is maybe a really bold generalization, but I see the V-Core, so the Ratrig, and maybe also a Rail Core and other more expensive, high performance printer kits. I see Voron as a synonym, or I have seen a Voron as a synonym for them. Because I think a Ratrig, even if it's built differently, it can perform quite similarly to a Voron. And I think, and from all what I have read so far, that of course they are different, but they are kind of on the same level. So this is for the reason I see them as a synonym, and that's the reason why I did not name them last time, and this was also something I thought about when I did the Voron video last week. Should I name all of the alternatives to Voron? And I just said, okay, any DIY printer kit that is Core XY and higher performance and has kind of a name and reputation.
Yeah, the thing with DIY kits, probably Voron less than others maybe, because Voron is very... There's a canon way to build one. But printer kits always depend on the builder and on the choices they make. You always have choices which components you go with, be it hot end controller board, drag chains, which belts you use. You always have those choices unless you buy a kit that includes the entire thing. But these are DIY machines at their heart, and largely how they're going to perform depends on you, the builder, and which choices you make and how you tune it, how you build it, etc. Yeah, they are. I mean, I wouldn't say that they're interchangeable, but there are some differences, sure. But they all fall into the same category. They all appeal to the same group, more or less.
Please, listeners, don't hate me for that. Not all of the fanboys will be screaming at me. It's just to keep things simple. Okay, let's move on quickly. Kevin's asking, Stefan mentions viscous losses about longer hot ends and longer meltzones. Would a longer hot end create worse stringing? From my experience, yes. If you compare also the retraction settings that you need, and also the performance and quality of a Volcano hot end compared to a normal V6 hot end, the Volcano hot ends usually need more retraction, and if that is due to the viscous losses of just the molten material in the nozzle or something else, I'm not 100% sure. I would say, or my explanation for that so far was that you have more molten material in the nozzle that will expand if you leave it there for a bit, just because it gets even warmer. It might start bubbling up a little bit, and that will create additional oozing and in the end also cause stringing. Yeah, agreed. So essentially,
so worse stringing is like the question is like, is it oozing, as in you leave your hot end there and just filament loaded and you're not extruding anything and then it oozes out? Or is it stringing because you have elasticity essentially in the drive system, so your extruder pushes and then with it, not a delay but with like an exponential function, your filament actually comes out the nozzle. And it's probably both of those. So stringing by itself probably is a very muddy definition of what's going on. But yeah, there are many things that work. Though Volcano, I don't think is as bad as people probably think. Volcano very much is a very usable... Oh, Google, I'm not talking to you. Volcano is a very usable Meltzone length, and we've both looked at Revo, and Revo lengthwise is closer to Volcano than it is to V6.
Yeah.
And that thing doesn't string badly.
I think one of the reasons might also be that I do have the feeling that volcanoes usually string more, is that when you're using a volcano, you're usually not using it with a 0.4 millimeter nozzle.
Yeah, exactly. And that, of course, has less back pressure or less restriction against all the molten stuff that might be bubbling, might be boiling, might be expanding up in the melt zone. So yeah, larger nozzle does ooze more because there's just less resistance.
Yeah.
All right. Philip is just making a quick comment about the Formbot kit for the Voron that I used. And I commented that it wasn't like the bestest of qualities. And he's like, hey, it's gotten better now. Got it for $9.99. Arrived 5 days later and had a Dragon high flow hot end. Yeah. So like I said before, like companies keep changing the products they ship under the same name. Though this is the Voron 2.4 R2 specifically. Mine was a original 2.4. Yeah. Companies keep changing what they sell under the same name.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's different here.
And Philip was also, well, especially mentioning that the LDO kit costs, I think, even $1,500 if you buy it here in Germany from a reseller. And he said that the Formbot kit was almost similar of quality, so the $500 saving is worth it. And that could be totally true. My experience with the LDO and the Formbot, my Formbot kit was like 2 years old now. It wasn't as nice as with the old LDO one. So for the moment, I would prefer that. But as you just said, things are changing. And if you're thinking about buying a Voron kit, just join the Voron Discord. There are resellers doing support for their kits, for example, but I think I haven't seen Formbot in there. But people will also share their experience with different kits, so you can find out if you should buy a Formbot one, an LDO one, a Phystech, or I don't know. There are a ton of resellers.
Physitech, yeah.
Physitech.
I probably pronounced differently, but yeah. It's almost like somebody should get both and compare and build both and compare how they stack up.
If you are bored, I think it took me almost 2 months to build my Voron kit.
Well, I mean, I did the 2.4 in live stream, and it was a good bit over 30 hours. Of course, then live stream stuff distracts you, and I did some stuff off camera, but yeah, 30 hours is probably doable. So 2 weeks of work, 2 weeks worth of work. Roughly to build both and then to make content on it. We'll see. That's something that Nero would do.
Yeah. Last one.
You're not gonna read it?
So yeah, David Beresford is asking a question for the next pod. Have you ever experimented with alternatives to hot end mounted blower fans like the bird air pumps, CPAPs, and bed cooling fans? And when do you think cooling innovations will reach mainstream printers? These kind of coolings are common on speedy benching machines, but aren't seen on mainstream ones other than the X1, which I believe has bed cooling. So bed cooling is, so what the X1 uses, it has a very big fan on the side of the printer, a radial fan that pushes air upwards and to a duct which comes out exactly at the height of the hot end. So basically cools the
entire layer that you've just
the entire layer.
Same time, yeah. Whereas your part cooling fan typically only cools the area around the hot end that is being printed right now. And it's two different interesting approaches, because the bird air pumps, I've first seen that one on Mitch's, almost forgot his name, on Mitch's backpack printer at ERRF, I think it was 3 years ago, where you used one of those little bird air pumps and just a tiny air nozzle right at the pot end nozzle, and apparently that seemed to work pretty well. And it's a much more concentrated stream of air that provides more cooling, but in a smaller spot. Whereas the bed cooling solutions are a wider stream of air, but that has less force but cools a wider area. And I think both are valid solutions. If you go in
valid solutions to a problem. The bird air system has the advantage that you don't have to carry around a fan, and with the bed air cooling, you have the advantage that you can just mount a very beefy very beefy fan to the side of the machine, which doesn't affect the weight of the hot end, for example. So doesn't matter if it's an 8-watt fan or a 200-watt fan.
Yeah. And of course, one of the drawbacks of having the fan on the hot end and having the cooling on the hot end is that it really just cools that small section. And I've seen that before. If you have a larger print, vases, for example. Well, vases have very thin walls that cool very quickly. But say you have something that has 2 columns that is printed in 2 different spots. It prints one spot and it cools there and then moves over to the other spot. But this first one hasn't been cooled sufficiently. And then the second one, so you don't get enough cooling time on your on some compressed parts where you're laying down a lot of material. So that is something that bed fans could help with, or of course the concentrated bird airs that just cool it before it moves away from that spot.
Yeah. And the question, when we're gonna see that, I think only when there's the necessity, or it's cheaper in the end. But a cheap radial fan is cheap, and it doesn't weigh too much. So for most of the machines, it's a very feasible solution. If you need more cooling performance and don't have the possibility to strap on bigger fans onto the hot end, bed cooling is an option. But also the bird air system, where you only run the pressurized air hose down to the nozzle. But it's a more complex system, and in the end, it's the question if it's really necessary.
Not that much. But the question whether it's necessary, I think that's going to come by itself once you have machines that print faster than your standard Ender 3. If you're going at 40 millimeters a second, cooling is not that much of an issue. If you're going at 200 millimeters a second, you're going to run into some really hard roadblocks there. And it's actually my experiments just on a stock Prusa. How fast can you print? How fast can you print a Benchy? Were limited by how much cooling that machine provided. Yep. So even on those machines that are semi-well built, I think we are scratching that area, that territory where it does make sense to look into different cooling solutions. And with the X1 making faster printing mainstream more or less, or making it at least like visible to people, where it's like, hey, that is also an option now. I think there are going to be machines that copy some of the design cues from the X1.
And they kind of had the necessity because they have the enclosed build chamber, so the general temperature in the chamber is higher, so they had to increase cooling for the same cooling performance.
Exactly. Higher ambient temperature means the same amount of airflow is going to carry less heat away from your part.
So we'll see.
It's going to be interesting times, hopefully.
I'm still waiting for you getting a Bamboo Lab X1. I would really like to know what your general impression of the machine is.
I need to respond to the emails. I've not responded to single email, I think, in the last 6 months. There's too much going on, and then when you don't know like if you're gonna have the capacity to even deal with it, like you don't want to make any promises. So
and since it's still only available for pre-order, and I think they're shipping the next units in October or something like that, doesn't really make sense to review it at the moment, to be honest.
Okay. Well, and that is going to be it for today. My next loaf of bread is coming out in 8 minutes, so better wrap this one up. Thank you, Thank you, Stefan, for your time. Thank you, everyone, for watching, listening, wherever you listen. Get subscribed on YouTube. Get subscribed on your favorite podcasting catcher. If you want to support us, all the links are below to Stefan's and my Patreon.
Super thanks are available now on that video.
On the video on YouTube.
Yeah, on the video on YouTube. So that's also a way how you can support us. But yeah, thanks for your time, Tom, and thanks to the time of you listeners. And we're going to see you in the next one.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.